Today, I'd like to go over the mechanics of the manifestation. Because according to the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita, and more recently put into concise terms by Ramana Maharshi, there is a progression to the manifestation. It arises out of no-thingness, which is the one reality, and it rises into this apparent three-dimensional world that we apparently operate in. And I've built a 3D representation of it that I'd like to go over with you. Because it seems like when you get a visualization on how this works, when you start to disassemble it in self-inquiry, you will experience this disassembling directly. And so you'll start to understand, as you're in self-inquiry, how this manifestation works and how it gets disassembled, and you will experience that. You will take a visualization, a doing, and you'll transfer that into a direct experience of being. Okay, so we start down here with the self. The self is the one reality in which all that is known arises out of. Okay? And what arises out of that? You could say the first thought of I am. I am is the original thought. Now, anything below the I am is unmanifested. This is the unmanifested realm. So anytime anyone, you could say a self-realized one, only identifies themselves as I am, this means that nothing ever came into play after that. It's not until I am simultaneously adds something to it other than it. Once that happens, the realm of time and space come into play, and the world as we know it comes into play. Okay? So the ego ties reality, because we'll say everything from the I am below is reality, to that which is unreal. Any of our, we'll call them adjuncts. An adjunct is anything we add onto the primary source. Okay, the primary source is I am. But once I am becomes a man, or a friend, or a homeowner, or a career-based person, or an employee, or a businessman, or anything, everything that we're going to go over here is an adjunct, which is unreal, added onto that which is real. And what holds what is unreal to that which is real is the ego. Okay? Some of you might have heard the ego known as the knot that ties non-reality to reality. Okay? So this is the primary factor. Everything comes back to ego. Okay? So ego, once it comes into existence, creates a mind, and it does that through a time platform. Once it has a time platform, it can string all of its thoughts and memories, all of its ideas and images, and all of its identities out on that time platform. Once that time platform is built, it creates a space platform in which a body comes into play, and that body has feelings and sensations and emotions. Once that body is in play, that body has 5 senses that we're all aware of. That's how we communicate with the world, because it is actually the 5 senses that generate the world. So this is how the apparent manifestation plays out. It goes through this sequencing. And so how do you disassemble this to come back and rest into the one love of yourself? Well, you start to see how it plays out, how it works. Once you understand how it works, how it's come into manifestation, you can start to see that if you start to disassemble the mind and body and senses, you can start to chew away at the ego, that's which is holding everything in place. Okay, so as we all know, every single thing that we know that's associated with our mind, body, and senses comes back to ego. There is not one thing, not one sense, not one thought, not one idea, not one thing that you know or are aware of does not come back to the ego. Okay? Think about that. Everything in your life is filtered through this sense of me, this sense of I, this cluster of energy that's contained in this body that thinks it's doing this body. Right? So, the primary way to disassemble this, to drop back into reality of I am and the self, is to just tackle the ego. Okay? This becomes very prevalent that we can't come after all of these different identities and everything we know about ourselves. Because once you work on, say, one identity and get this one to come down, and then you jump over to another one to work on, this one's come down, but this one will grow back. They never go away because you're never tackling the primary problem, which is the ego. Okay? That's why therapy works to a point. We can all agree that there is a relief from that, but it is not a elimination of problem. This message is saying that there is an elimination of your agitations in life so that you can rest down here in peace. So how do we start to get these yellow arrows to die down and have the ego be eliminated so we can drop back into self, into I am? Well, in self-inquiry, and I suggest that you're doing this at least initially in silence, maybe with silencing headphones and with your eyes closed in a relatively dark place so that you're putting yourself in the best environment you can to experience what I'm about ready to say. So in that environment, ego always has this sense of itself, this sense of I, this sense of me, this sense of person, this sense of individuality. It lies in here somewhere, and it is like a cluster of energy, of condensed energy that we run everything through in our life. It filters through this ego. And so what we do in self-inquiry is we grab a hold of that ego with our attention, and we drift back into what would be considered by the mind as that which isn't real. It doesn't exist. It's no-thingness. It's self. And so we drift back with that. We drift back until we start to see, and this may take a few months. This probably is not going to happen within the first few days or weeks, but that's why we say we're on the relentless pursuit of effortlessness. This will take a while. It's like learning anything else. You're learning how the insides of you work. Okay? You're drifting back. You're grabbing hold of this sense of I, and you're asking it, who am I? The ego is asking itself, who is it? And the ego, because it has arisen out of self, will turn around, so to speak, and go inward. It'll drop inward to see the source of itself. Okay, when you're still and silent, you can feel this sense somewhat drop in. Okay, there is an experience of dropping in. In that experience, you are still holding on to that sense of I with your attention, and your attention is moving with it into self. Once in self, once you understand over time what self is, the experience of self, which is a non-objective experience, that's why it takes a while to get an understanding of what it is relative to an objective experience. But once you drift back in with your attention, you do your darndest to hold your attention at self. And the longer you stay in self, the more accustomed your attention will get to turn to yourself relative to the ego. Okay? So, you're moving from what you would consider from the red up a sense of doing. There's a sense of doing going on up here. Because the ego is the doer. It does everything. It's the thinker. It's the knower. It's the I do everything and lifer. And anything below the red is the direct experience of being. Okay, so as you're taking all of this and the sense of I and you're drifting back, the experience is the direct experience of moving from an egoic doing into a nobodiness being. It's when being experiences itself directly. So there is an experience of moving, of movement. Something is happening. Something has to change in all of this. What is changing? The sense of I, as you move back, is becoming less and less dense. So the experience of me, the experience of individuality is becoming less and less dense. The experience of the centerness is starting to dissipate in that. Okay? Let it be clearly known, though, self, or I am, does not change. It is the permanent one reality that is unchangeable. So what is changing is the sense of individualism. Okay? And when you are still enough and silent enough, you will experience this drifting back in, and with your attention, you will attend to it as it drifts back in. And it just drifts into being. It just completely disintegrates. And that is what you're after here. Because that is the direct experience of knowing yourself directly. That is when being rests in and as itself as being. Being needs nothing other than itself to know itself. That's saying that being doesn't need an ego or a mind or a body or senses to know itself. This just knows itself by being itself. And so when you get here, this isn't here. This mind, this body, these senses aren't here. Okay, that's why you can never know this with this. Ever. You only know this by it's an inherent knowing or a direct experience. And so, what is self-realization? Self-realization is when the sense of I, the sense of who you think you are, the sense of who you've mistaken yourself to be, is seen, is experienced with 100% conviction that it never existed. When you experience that, when you know that, when you tell yourself, when being knows itself as itself, it's realized that this never existed and this was running the show the entire time. So nothing new comes into play. You're not gaining anything in this. You're realizing what you're not and remembering what you have always been. And that is self-realization. So while in self-inquiry and you're drifting back within, you are most likely going to experience what I just mentioned here. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. Put them down below, and I will do my best to answer them. Feel free to book a one-on-one session with me to talk about specific experiences that you're having, and I can do my best to help you over any hurdles so that you can be down here permanently. This is possible. The sages, what the sages say is true. If you put in the time, if you have the perseverance to understand what's being said here and to make the effort to turn within and drop in here, you will experience what the great sages of India have promised: a life of immense peace, ever-present happiness, and unconditional love. Take care.